Thank you, Madam Chair. Committee members, Frank Harwood, Deputy Commissioner for the Department of Education. We try to answer the questions that came about yesterday. Starting off with the idea of the fourth grade assessment, the department is, and the state board are well aware that the fourth grade is an outlier of each of those. In talking to the folks yesterday in the testing department, the fourth grade assessment has been validated, so it's a valid test, and it measures the standards that were set up for fourth grade, and the cut scores were for all of the different grades were set by the by teacher groups that were they looked at what they thought was reasonable for those. So it's been consistent and it's valid, but clearly it has a it is a different bar along the way. And so the department has been working on that. One of the things I think it's important that I'll just kind of get out in front, the way that they've been working on that is that in answer to, I think, one of the last questions, the math and reading standards were last updated a year ago. And so the department has been working on 5 years of development of a replacement test, which will actually go into effect next year. That test will be comparable back to the current test, but the current test is 10 years old, and this was just part of a cycle that the department and the state board has been working through. So one of the issues that they are working on is how fourth grade, how the scores for fourth grade could be more consistent with the other grades. So moving on to interim tests. So I just want to clarify some nomenclature. Districts have access to interim tests. And then I think that I think it probably got talked about as practice tests yesterday. So there are 3 interim tests per grade. Next year, there will only be 2 interim tests per grade as we move forward. The interim tests are set, that the window for that is set, and the districts can choose to participate in that. There's a chart down there that talks about that for 24 there were 240,000 interim tests administered, and about half the schools use them. So the interim tests are about half the length of the regular test. The format for that is it's the same. It's called KITE. The test engine is the same for both the interim tests and the summative test. Districts don't have the ability to change the interim tests; those are set by KU. All of the data through these tests actually is collected at KU and then is disseminated back out. Districts get the interim test results about 2 weeks after the window closes. For the summative test, which is going on right now, the goal of KSDE is that the results for those get back to the districts before the end of the school year. Now, those are not finalized because actually one of the things that happens is that there is cleanup of the data that the districts are involved in. That's why they don't get finalized till later. But we wanted to get that back to districts and teachers before the end of the year. The other option are what were called mini tests, and mini tests are things that districts or teachers can do at any time, and they are much more whichever standard that the teacher wants to assess at that time. Those results are available immediately after upon the completion of the test to the teacher.
Are the mini tests through KU also?
Yes.
Okay, so the interim assessments are not as lengthy as the summative, but the mini are not as lengthy as the interim.
And the mini, so for an example, for an ELA, the teacher could pick a particular passage that's available, and then the questions that would come with that. In math, they actually have more leeway to pick particular questions that go along with each standard, but they're tailored towards whatever standard the teacher is wanting to assess at that time.
And are the mini assessments available throughout both semesters, not just within windows that the interims are?
And that's actually one of the reasons why we can't give you final on the minis for this year is that they could still be giving them now through the end of the year. The interims are set windows.
And all of those are online, is that correct?
They are all online. And just a little bit of about your question. Yes, I will tell you that question when I was a principal came up a lot. But the vast majority of our districts have and students have access to devices much more readily. And so when the state assessment first went online and you had to schedule into a computer lab, I think that was more of an issue. Right now, students are taking quizzes and other tests on the device already. So it's
Most.
yeah, yeah. Many of our students would probably have more of an issue if you gave them a piece of paper to do it with versus then doing it online. But I will say that varies district to district. Not every district is 1-to-1, so
Okay.
it does vary.
Thank you so much. I'll turn to my. Oh yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your information here. I just wondered if there was any specific reason why there was so many pretty big, 50,000 difference in testing on English language and the mathematics. It's just kind of a big difference and pretty consistent difference. Is there a simple reason for that?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know that. That's certainly something we'd want to talk to districts about. Right now, districts have decide whether they're going to use them or not. But I don't know the answer to that right now.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's an excellent question, particularly as we're, we talk about literacy, and oftentimes that's referred to as just being with regard to reading and reading comprehension. But math literacy is an issue that certainly has come up and is being addressed in this piece of legislation as well. So I think we'll all be focusing a little bit more on that. To the chair, co-chair.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. All right, so we wanted to go ahead and respond to your offer yesterday about taking the 75 of the 77.5 million for new special education spending and including it in the CPIU Midwest amount. So just for clarification for the committee, thank you, Jennifer, for providing these numbers to us, but the CPIU increase for 2025 is equal to 228.4 million. So that 75 million would be inside that 228.4 million. That's attributable to the 293 per student base increase that's multiplied by your weightings. For 2026, that number goes up to adding 188 million. So between those 2 years, we're getting 415.7 absolute new money for education. However, having said that, we are going to hold our position of using the 75 million as new money. So in essence, what we are saying from the House position is that this 228 million would be in addition to 77, or well, it's 77.5, but 75 of SGF. If you add that with some of the other increases, that's $309 million of new funding that didn't exist. And so we'll respectfully decline the offer to include it in the CPIU and go ahead and maintain our position of keeping it as an add-on to the CPIU.
Okay, at this time, I guess what I would like us to do is if we could go through the items that appear on the pink sheet. Let's talk a little bit about that. And let's go through the items because there are some items that obviously had gotten swept when we were looking at the Department of Ed's budget on the Senate side and what went on to Ways and Means. So let's look at what it is that you are including in funding as well with that $309 million new dollars. And let's see what items from the pink list we also might be pulling. So if you would be willing to just, obviously, you have made clear your position on item number one. It's a 75 million for special education additional funding plus the 2.5 million of ARPA funds, which takes it to the 77.5.
Yes, Madam Chair, so number one would be included. Number one takes away number two. So number two is just lapsing what the governor did since we exceeded her recommendation. Number three is maintained in the hopes that all of that works out. But our understanding is either way, those monies will be swapped. So keep holding that. Go ahead.
And that amount would increase. Does this amount include if in fact the 20 mils is dropped to the 18 mils?
Jennifer.
Jennifer Light, KLRD. No, Madam Chair, it does not include that 18 mil if it drops to 18 mils. This is just holding it at the 20 mil.
Okay, then talk to us a bit about the mill and what we think the value of each mill is, because we have heard everything from $35 million per mill, 55 million per mill, 45 million per mill. So talk to us a bit about that.
And if you would also talk to us about how this, I thought I understood, and probably incorrectly, that it would automatically reconcile in terms of the payment, but just be sure we,
The payment is reconciled. I just want to make
Yeah.
sure that we get a feel for what that dollar amount is. The reason I want us to know clearly where we are on that dollar amount is it needs to be acknowledged that it is being backfilled.
and I would say if you just take the 860 million that we receive for the 20 mils and divide it by 20, it's 43 million. So it might be right in that ballpark, and it's going to change every year.
Just 1 minute, Madam Chair. I'll get that answer for you.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on to number 4. Is it my understanding that we are going to strike because of the work that's being done in Ways and Means and Appropriations, that MHIT, the pilot program, is already being addressed?
That is correct, and I am sorry, when I just said it was 860, it was 793 million. So you take that, divide by 23. Yes, we are okay with that, just so everybody understands. MHIT, mental health, has moved into the appropriations budget.
But we will keep the language with regarding it can't be just for CMHCs. Okay.
That works. Nick looks confused. Can you?
So my understanding is you're striking the appropriation for the mental health intervention team pilot program, but wanting a requirement.
We want to maintain the requirement, which is the Senate position, that the grant cannot be exclusive to just CMHCs, but it can be other healthcare providers for the services.
Is this, I don't know what's going on in appropriations with this. Is this staying within the KSDE budget or is it moving to a different budget?
Maybe someone in the audience that was up until midnight can tell us, but I was just told that it is in the appropriations. Jennifer.
There is a proviso that is currently being discussed in the appropriations bill that is the mega bill that would move it to KDADS. And the appropriations for that is currently set at 19.5 million for 25. But that is the current proviso that is being discussed. It has not been settled on in the mega bill for budget. And it is in the KDADS budget.
So if it's in the KDAD's budget, then they would handle all of the grants. Is that correct?
That is my understanding, Madam Chair. And they would work with KSD as they have in the past, but it would, all the appropriations would be there and they would have the control of the program.
So I guess I'd like some clarification as to what the Department of Education, what their role will be in that.
What the Department of Education's role would be in that?
So when this was being debated as a House bill, it was our understanding that we would not have a role. We would be transitioning our data collection to KDADS, and that the program would be completely administered by KDADS, and KDA and the KSD would not have a role.
Have any role at all? Okay, thank you. Well, our concern was historically what has been very controlling and limiting for different school districts even have access to the grant money is that the services could only be provided by CMHCs. We only have 29 CMHCs in the state. That means a whole lot of school districts don't have access to any types of those services. So we certainly wanted to open it up so that those services could be provided by other organizations. I mean, what we had is one organization boxed out everybody else, the other providers, and it limited access to so many schools. When you, bless you back there. When we read about MHIT and we see everything that's written about it, it says even their own testimony, when we had our hearing on it, it says that it's providing mental health for all Kansas kids. Well, that's a lie. It's a lie. It was only providing those services to those districts that one could have the grant, but two had a CMHC that would provide those services. So what I want us to do is make sure that we get away from the lies of what this 19.5 million really means. We will work, if need be, I will work with, I would certainly appreciate effort on the House side as well, that we make sure that we have language so that it is open truly for all school districts to have the opportunity, even if they don't have a CMHC that can provide those services. So I'll work on my end. If Madam Chair, you would work on your end.
Yes, I can do that. One thing we might ask our revisers is to be in communication with the revisers of the appropriations, Jill Walters on the House side, so that that can be relayed, that is the desire of the chair and the chairs, if they would include that expansion. Do you have any questions, Nick?
My concern that I raised is just that the budget is moving and that we would not be able to put a proviso in to affect that other proviso. The only option you guys may have in this bill, if it is in fact moving over to KDAD's budget, is a new section of law to require that any monies that are appropriated for this type of program be utilized for FQHCs. In addition to CMHCs. But then again, I would note that any proviso that's adopted by the Appropriations and Ways and Means Committee could not withstand that type of provision if they so chose to. So it might be best to work it on your end.
We'll do that. Okay, let's move on, but making note that that is increased to 19.5 million. Where are you with regard to professional development?
We have included the 1.8 million for professional development, for the increase only to be for the science of reading or for the advancement of math improvement.
And our position had been that it would be specifically for in-service training for literacy and science of reading. So I don't think that we would be opposed to adding the math to that as well. So we will keep that language. Let's go on to the mentor teacher program.
mentor teacher program, again, we accepted the governor's recommendation of the 1.3 million additional dollars. Oh, I'm sorry, the 1 million additional dollars to the 1.3. The additional dollars would be used grades K through 5 for the science reading. And I think, Madam Chair, you mentioned you wanted to make it a little more specific. So those that have actually been trained are the ones that are mentoring. So language would need to be adapted to allow for your change.
We do, I guess, Tamara, you do have that language from what was sent from the budget recommendation that we sent on to Ways and Means. You don't have, who had that language? Who took that language down? JG took that. We do want to.
I will find it and
Okay.
get that clarified.
Okay, so if we could find that language, please, that would be helpful. So that is rather than 1.3, but it's 2.3. Okay. Okay, now let's go on to, so number 9, line 9, it's deleted. 10, the 5 million is added. Is that correct?
Yes, we did. There was a partnership, I believe that was the Patterson Foundation in Northwest Kansas. And so because of that, we maintained it with the stipulation that it's one-time funding and not to proceed further.
Now let's talk about item 11, which we had a little bit of discussion about yesterday. So with regard to that, you struck, or did you deleted the $1 match?
Correct, we did. We maintained safe and secures. We used it for a different purpose, the pilot purpose, but we did strike the 1-to-1.
Okay. We would like to have the 1-to-1 returned. And do we have that language? And we have some language that we would like to share with regard to school safety and security grants. So there was a bill that passed out of, I think it did pass out of the House, and it had to do with AED, so the defibrillators for schools. It had other components to it. One of the problems on the Senate side is there really was not any true data that was shared with us as far as how many school facilities didn't have AEDs. It was just, it was an open-ended ask without any quantifiable information. And the bill, it did not pass out of committee. It didn't have the votes to pass out of committee. So we would like to have the AEDs added to a part of that school safety and security grants. We also want to I really hesitate, and we've had some discussion about this yesterday, about naming a particular manufacturer when we haven't gone through any type of a bid process. So we wanted to just kind of open that up and just say that obviously we're looking at firearm detection software with the camera systems, the security systems that schools have. And so set some guidelines as to, it has to comply with industry standard information. It has to be designated as qualified for anti-terrorism technology. So the items that we have included here as it goes through the process, as schools are looking for those grants with the one-to-one match, they need to be, when they're working with the Department of Ed, make sure that it meets at least these kinds of specifications. And so that is the ask of the Senate on this. So it would be keeping the 5 million, adding the dollar for dollar match, and putting this language in there that adds the AEDs as well.
Well, Madam Chair, I have to admit, I like this a lot better than ours. I like the fact that it doubles the money and maintains the participation of the schools. So it goes from 5 million to 10 million. I like that there's flexibility. They can purchase cameras, they can purchase AED machines, and I like that, I do prefer this. I will double check with our members here, but I also like the fact that the department has to put together who fulfills this, and it has to be available within 30 days of the effective date of this so that schools can decide whether or not they want this. So rather than us have to circle back, let me just check with our members here. And they are in agreement that this is better than our position, so we'll accept that.
So at this time, we're going to take a quick break and respond to, oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, so thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to address a couple other issues. Number one, there is just a very simple deletion. We'd request that the Beloit money for at-risk students be just removed. It's a program that's no longer in existence. The money would elapse, but it would just clean that up for 24-25. Is that correct, Jennifer? So that's one item. The second one is I'm actually made a copy for everyone, and it's the evidence-based programs and practices. Oh, that's fine. Here you go. Did I give enough? I am one short. I will, okay, and I will make another copy for you. Okay. Well, this is the new evidence-based programs and practices, and appreciate the work of Kansas Department of Education and the state board for looking at it. And you can see all the different items that have been stricken from the list. This isn't actually, there are other items that were on a preceding or predecessor list that you don't see here. However, the point is the edits are being made and that's good. Now, the practice of KSD right now is that they work with districts. If districts are using something and show that there's progress, there's not really an issue to that. However, I have just an amendment that I'd like to make in relation to this. If Nick, you could pass that out. In addition to that amendment, I'm going to ask for a conceptual amendment to be added to that so you guys can discuss it. But let's first pass it out. Okay, we also have, this is already out, right? Okay. All right, so if we take a look at this, first, just taking a note on page 47, we already eliminated line 7 through 15, so that's in a different agreement. And really, let's take a look at the balloon on page 47. If the state board removes any program or service from the state board's list of approved at-risk educational programs and services, a school district that is implementing any such program or service may apply to the state board to continue to make expenditures from the school district's at-risk education fund to continue to implement such program or service. When considering a school district's application to continue using any such program or service, the state board shall require a school district to demonstrate the following. First, there's academic improvement in either mathematics or English language arts. Or second, that there is improvement in attendance, college and career readiness, measures of the education climate through a showing of a measurable decrease in detentions, expulsions, tardiness, or other behavioral issues that hinder student learning. And there's a conceptual amendment that I'd like to also add, and it's based on your comments yesterday, Madam Chair. We don't have any direct reporting of expenditures. So conceptually, I would also like to add with your pilot program that you're going to be sharing with us, that they pilot an expenditure reporting for 1 year that would then be advanced the next year based on how it pilots. So a pilot reporting of expenditures. And that way, this actually ties in better to it. And the conversation I had this morning with the principal was that they had successfully used the animated alphabet and animated literacy, which is the letters program. And they had also successfully moved from some average rankings to a blue ribbon school with the Kagan strategies. And they were very disappointed that they were eliminated. And Frank, Dr. Harwood said, well, certainly they can still maintain usage, but just for clarity for those districts about how to maintain usage so that there isn't any misunderstanding, we are asking for some clarity to be codified so that they know that, yes, you can still put it on your expenditures list because now we'd be requiring it, but you do need to verify that with the state board, and state board would have the ability to enact the proper process for that. Does that work for you, Nick, in terms of, do you understand the conceptual piece?
So my understanding is most likely this will be on page 23 of the bill within the at-risk reports that school districts are submitting. They would be submitting their at-risk education fund expenditure, an expenditure report as part of their reporting. And you said that you would like it to be a pilot program. I just need to know if we're wanting to sunset that provision or just enact it and take a look at it.
I would like it to be enacted. That can be clarified by the Senate when they talk about their pilot program. But the thought is that it wouldn't be required of everybody next year. It would be required the year after, but it would be included in those pilot groups. So yes, it's part of the plan moving forward. It's not sunsetting. However, it is part of the pilot that the Senate is going to be offering here soon. But that is just a simple little offer to you all. And those two, I think, are the only changes.
So to be clear, the pilot expenditure reporting is not a part of this balloon. It would instead appear on page 23 where we're addressing the at-risk, what would turn into a pilot program if accepted by the House.
Yes, with the one caveat that I do want it to be included in forthcoming years, but we're only starting it with your pilot.
That the implementation of the expenditure reporting, likewise for all districts, would be delayed for a year.
And I would note, Madam Chair, that it should be, since the at-risk reports go online, this should be part of that. So it also should be online. So nobody has to ask for the expenditure report. They can simply find it online. So I think that's would be true with this.
Only because you handed this out, I would say that I have heard from some school districts, and they were surprised when they saw the strikeouts. And part of the surprise was it indicates that KSDE has reviewed all programs and practices listed from the approved list. Those that are no longer approved for state at-risk funding are crossed out. But their questions were, what were the criteria that were used? And I don't think that that's published. I don't think that that's published along with the list, is it? You can just nod yes or no. I think it would be helpful as they're going through to see what the criteria was, if in fact what we're calling for them to do is, if they're using something, if they're going to be appealing essentially to the Department of Education to continue something, they would like to know what the reasons were for things to have been cut ahead of time. You may come to the mic.
So I think some of the confusion is that, so the department has been reviewing based on current law. And so there have been a number of lists. The list that complies with current law is very short. We've made some guesses on what could happen based on what happens, changes in the law about what is allowed to be on the list. And so we've talked about what that will be. And so once this is finished and we know exactly what the law says about what is allowable, then we will finalize the list and say, these are the criteria that these things had to meet. If you have something that what we've been telling districts now is that if you want to continue to use something that doesn't meet these qualifications based on the bill that has been discussed, you would do that as a provisional. And then we would work towards how some of those things on the provisional could become part of the list once they meet the review that's in the statute. So that's been some of the. As soon as we get more clarity, we'll be happy to provide more to the districts.
Okay, so we are going to take a brief break and we'll consider this balloon amendment. Senator Sykes.
Thank you. I agree that we do need to have some clarification on at-risk programs based on current law and the list and all of that. But my question would be, if one district is currently using it and they're appealing it, and then and they're showing some improvements, why are we not allowing then another district to also be able to use that program? That would be my question.
It would be up to them to be working with the Department of Education. I know what you're saying. This only addresses if they're currently using something that's been struck from the list. But what we do know is neighboring districts will share, we're using this and having good outcomes. And that's where it really needs to cycle back through the Department of Education. If it's that there's not, it's not research-based, then it needs to jump into the position of provisional, correct?
So then to follow up, it could possibly, if it's not on the list, but a district is using it, they are showing that there are increases in attendance or academics, there is measurable things happening, then another district you feel would be able to request use of this provisionally. I'm just looking at legislative post audit and how we've been saying some districts are not using those funds for, and I think we are kind of maybe opening the door for that.
So the guidance we've been giving districts so far, based on the language of the bill, is that they each of them would have to submit it as a provisional program until such time that it had enough support that it could be on the list. But certainly we would, if we took the same rationale from one district, we would take it from the other. Our understanding of the current bill is that each district would have to submit that separately. But that will also depend on the final language of the statute.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to reiterate that we did remove the 5-year requirement for peer review. So we heard the difficulties with that. We removed it. And the provisional, I think the assessment of the provisional is spot on. That's the legislative intent. It may be used provisionally until it is deemed to be research-based.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at the balloon. And how do we know that academic improvement or the education climate improvement is attributable to the program or service of at risk? Because I, as an administrator, implemented a tardy policy that had nothing to do with an at-risk program that was very successful. That could be used to justify keeping an at-risk program that has nothing to do with the improvements that you're listing.
Madam Chair, I'd be open to changing that or on I to and, so that there are improvements. So if these other items were just, created or through good policies, or we can eliminate some of those. But I do think attendance is something that schools are struggling with. There's a 30% absentee rate in some districts and higher. And we're seeing that, and you can't learn if you're not there. And so, even if academics isn't where we want it to be, the fact that they're going to be in class because, let's say, the JAG-K program is encouraging them to be there, I think there's merit to that. And my intent was to make sure it's measurable. So they have to show some measurable. But if that's, not agreeable to the Senate, it's not going to hurt my feelings.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Something can be measurable, but not correlated or related to the program or service we're trying to measure. So my suggestion might be where it says demonstrate the following directly attributable to the program or service. They need to document that this program or service is why we're seeing this. And of course, there could be other factors that play into that, but I think that's the best safety net we can use to make sure that the continuation of that at-risk program, to prove the funding or to justify the funding, is that's giving us positive results. And I don't see that in this balloon.
Representative Williams.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. And also, because this will be the first time next year that we start to see expenditure reports, and we would also see explanations for those expenditure reports. And they're then having to make the case of why those items are on their reports. I think that provides really improved accountability for that $730 million we're spending on at-risk. So excellent. And if there are no problems, we'll accept that.
Would you restate that again, please, Senator Erickson?
Certainly, Madam Chair. In the balloon at the end, where it says the state board shall require a school district to demonstrate the following directly attributable to the program or service, or however the revisers need to craft that. But I think it needs to be tied to the program or service that is being requested continued funding.
So our revisers have that language. Senator Sykes.
I understand this. I just, I think we want results, and I don't know if we can measure every program directly attributable, because we want the results of increased attendance, less tardies, career and college readiness. I just wonder if we are seeing results and schools can show those results with whatever program that they're using, whether or not it's directly attributable. I do maybe have a little concern, because I think there are some things that are hard to measure.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, my point being, absolutely, there are other factors. We're not going to be able to say definitively, absent this program, we wouldn't have seen this. There are other factors in play. However, if you've got an at-risk program or service that's designed to address academic issues, and then you're saying, we want to continue that even though our academics aren't improving, but our tardiness is, I think that's a problem. I think they need to be able to say, this program is to address an academic issue. We're seeing growth in that academic issue. They can't use climate to justify an academic program and vice versa. That's what I want to make sure we don't do.
Okay, and so the question is, when we look at item I, semicolon or, so the question is, do we want to keep it as that or make it semicolon and? Are we keeping them separate? I'm asking Senator Sykes because she mentioned that.
I would think if we're adding the language that Senator Erickson said, I would prefer the or, because we are academic improvement, and then the college and career readiness. I mean, I think that list is in there.
Okay, so we're going to leave it as or. So I think that we have agreement on this balloon. So let's pause. We're going to pause real quickly. position, so we're willing to adopt that. At this time, we would also like to counter to strike line 10. And I'll call on Senator Erickson to speak to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure why we're using SGF when the Children's Cabinet has funding through the Children's Initiative Fund, through the tobacco settlement. So I'm not sure why we're using SGF for that. I do not have a problem with the program and the match itself. I wonder why we're using SGF instead of Children's Initiative funds for that.
Great question. I did look that up, and Jennifer, could you pull that up? I don't know if they had enough money remaining, but I have no problem with that being used on the tobacco funds. Yes.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've looked at the key fund balance, which is where the transfer from the SIF comes from, and I believe there would be enough to cover. So I'm just wondering if that's a possibility to use the funds that the Children's Cabinet.
Absolutely. Honestly, we didn't discuss that as an alternative, so that would probably be just an oversight on our part. We're fine with that.
Representative Wynn.
We have Melissa Rooker here to answer the question. We're looking at each other, shaking yes, shaking no.
Well, I'm not sure what the question is.
Whether there's
Do you
enough
want to
funds or not.
answer?
I would agree with that. I would like to know whether the availability of the funds, I know in the Senate, it was our position, I believe originally, to use those funds from SGF, but if she could answer, I would like that.
Would you like to come forward?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Melissa Rooker, Executive Director of the Children's Cabinet. Technically, yes, the Kansas Endowment for Youth has an ending balance of whatever the number is. It's a moving target, but it's hovering around $20 million. So technically that money is there. It's important to remember that our CIF budget is funded by that transfer each year from the Key Fund to the CIF based on the tobacco settlement annuity. That annuity is projected to trend down. It was less last year than the budget that we're running in the CIF. And the concern is that without the backstop of enough funding in the endowment, that we are really off kilter in terms of the integrity of the CIF.
So my response is, as was identified, this is a one-time. It's one time, and the Senate position was, it was struck when we sent out the report for Ways and Means. So that is the Senate ask, and we need a response. We'll need a response from the House on that.
I think we were just kind of looking at each other. As long as the money's there, it's one time, so it does cost a $5 million reduction, but it'll bounce back with additional funding in future years. So yes, we would be okay with that change.
This time, do we have language for the pilot yet? Do you have language for the pilot? If we could just pass that out so that, yes, Jennifer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clarify. So the modification would be not SGF, it would be CIF money or key money. I just want to make sure that we have it correct when we move forward.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, the SIF gets their transfer from the Key Fund. So if there's not enough in the SIF fund, then I would think they could have a transfer from the Key Fund. However, that would work internally.
And we're simply saying it's not coming from SGF. So do we need some clarification or?
No, Madam Chair, I just, because of where it sits in the budget, in the bill, I just need to know if if we're not moving it from SGF. CIF is what I am hearing from,
If this is the way you're proceeding, our budget is spread across 5 different agencies. The key fund transfer is in the Department of Administration budget. That is where it's specified how much gets transferred. And then the CIF is, that budget is all specific line item appropriations. So there isn't existing CIF capacity. It will need, the funding has to source from the key fund as an increase. This is effectively a new line item one time in the CIF budget.
Is that the clarification that you need? Okay, great. So what we have before us is going to the pilot. And it is simply, rather than each school district, it just says districts. On new section 6, it says each participating district Board of Education shall submit. So again, it's just the participating, those that are going to participate in the pilot. And that really is more specifically addressed on the last page. And it says for this next school year, the provisions of A through H shall be implemented as a pilot program by 10 school districts selected by the State Board of Education for participation. When selecting the 10 districts that participate, they shall select a diverse array of districts with consideration given to district size, location, student demographics. I think, could we add one more thing that would be their level of participation or training in the science of reading, their prior training, because I think that we really do want to see that comparison between the districts that perhaps really haven't done much with regard to that. It's not a penalty, it's just gives another component that we can make a comparison to, so we can make that. And then it would be that commencing the following year, the provisions are implemented by all school districts. That also allows for any future amendments or changes that might want to be made in a statewide implementation based on the feedback that we receive from those districts that participate. Representative Nguyen.
Thank you. Question,
Yes.
is there then language someplace else before following that then explains to the other districts how they proceed since they're not participating in the pilot?
Well, the Department of Education will be providing that, the Board of Education, but their implementation isn't until the following year. So they don't.
And then I'm saying in this bill, is there language or does there have to be language if you're not one of the 10 pilot members? Clear understanding how you proceed, the other 270 school districts.
Okay, so did you want to respond to that, Nick?
That's what this balloon is attempting to do, is to state that in the following school year, 24-25, it would be the 10 pilot districts. And then commencing in school year 25-26, all the other school districts would begin participation. So that.
No, you've missed the point. The question is, we understand what that says for those 10 pilot and thereafter. I'm saying for those 276 who are not part of the pilot in 24, 25, is it clear what they are doing?
They are not doing anything other than what they are normally doing.
Okay, and that's clearly stated?
So if you look at the original, and Nick can follow up with my comments, it does outline what they have to report, that it has to be online and provided in a manner that the department requires. Nick, is that in there? In a manner in which they require. So the original bill and for the cohort groups pretty much lays it out what they have to do. And I do believe the original bill said in a manner that the state board or department requires, but I don't know exactly where that is.
The way this would work is that the 10 school districts would participate for the following school year, and then all the other school districts would participate, and that would be for the cohort group selection and 4-year evaluation of those cohort groups. With regard to the reporting, you see on page 23 in subsection I there, the reporting would commence for all school districts and would be essentially what school districts are currently doing. Now, the two requirements relating to reporting on the cohort groups progress would not apply to districts who are not participating in the or not participating in the following year, but then would apply once they do begin participation. So reporting requirements would be applicable to all school districts except for those specific ones that are specific to the cohort reporting.
Okay, and page 23 is, and what line are you saying? Are you referencing?
So on page 23, that's those two lower balloons on subparagraphs capital A and capital B. Those are making those two reporting requirements subject to the pilot program. And whether you are a member of the pilot program or not, you would be reporting on your cohort group's progress. Otherwise, all school districts will be reporting their at-risk educational programs, services, resources, and the at-risk student count, and then the data and research that school districts are using to provide those programs. But those are current requirements.
That is line what?
Those reporting requirements are in lines 25 through 39 for school district reporting requirements.
So C and D and E.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And I assume that the Department of Education and the Board of Education, when the 10 districts are identified, everyone's going to know. You're going to make sure everybody knows. And people will be watching them. And you may even want to have some of them come and report to the Board of Education as well as to the legislature. So are we accepting of this?
Yes, I think the pilot idea is also another great Senate contribution. Thank you for that. And so, yes, we accept it.
Question from Senator Sykes.
And thank you. Kind of on the same lines as a representative validating what on the first page of this, just asking. Sorry. So on line 19, where I feel like this is where requiring of all school districts, do we need to, in certain student cohort groups, do we need to put the participating in this paragraph as well somewhere? I'm going to let the supervisor
To put pilot.
Well, I think this in general is talking about what all school districts are doing. And then it does mention the student cohort groups holding districts accountable. I feel like there needs to be something in this section making sure that it is those participating districts on that provision there.
Duly noted, and this is in the title of the bill, and I agree with you that we should probably put something in there that this is establishing a pilot program, so we can certainly update the title to include some language on that regard.
We're in agreement with that. You accepted our offer. I do not see that we have anything else outstanding. Would you please double check? Do we see anything outstanding that we have not addressed?
So one thing that Jenny has, if I'll get, so I assume there's an acceptance on the the requirement for the pilot schools to report at-risk expenditures in conjunction with the pilot program balloon. And then Ginny did raise the point that the fiscal year 2026 numbers, my assumption is you're agreeing to the position in the current underlying bill, but that was not discussed.
We are.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So
There is one more point of clarification.
okay.
The language that was agreed to for both professional development and the mentor teacher on the House side was just for the additional funding. On the Senate side, when they were, the funding had been fully deleted. So I just wanted to be clear that is the language being used for those two for the entirety of the money, or is it being used for just the enhancement sections?
Just the enhancements. Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There were still some provisions that we didn't with the local option budget and things, so I would feel more comfortable with an agree to disagree.
Okay. Can that be signed right now? Okay. She is. I believe we are adjourned. Thank you so much for your.
Maybe after.